Hello everyone, welcome back to Nick's Rambles. So I am so chuffed to see the great feedback coming through on my videos. I really didn't expect it. So I just want to give everyone a huge shout out. I do try and read, or I do try and respond and like to all the messages. I really didn't think my videos would get that many views. I'm really new at this. So on top of that, I heard the requests for better audio. So you can see this little, here you go. Let's hope it's a lot better. It really should be, because I've spent 2 days trying to sort it out. I'm about to go insane. Anywho, clearly you guys like my content. I'm super happy because I love doing this kind of stuff. And in light of the G20 and, oh my word, the budget speech, am I right? I want to quickly take you through the provincial audit report, just to show you the absolute dire state our provinces are in. And at the end, I will take you through the actual financials per province. I might split this video in two just because it goes for over an hour. But let's get started and we can take it from there. Okay, so this is 2022-2023. I couldn't find, give me a second, not used to having microphones in front of me clearly. What was I saying? I couldn't find the 2024 report, so we will do this for the meantime. I'm gonna flow through this as quick as I can, because like I say, if I go through everything in detail with all my rambling, of course, it's over an hour. So we'll see how we go. Anyway, the Auditor General is having an urgent call for performance accountability and transparency. So now, while I read through this report, just keep in mind what our government is proposing for the budget, okay? The message in my 2 previous general reports called on the administration for courageous, ethical, accountable, and citizen-centric leadership. Despite the commitments made in response to this call, action has been slow and has little impact. I mean, we're surprised, but we're not, right? Okay. The trend of poor audit outcomes. 34 municipalities obtained clean audits. Compliance with legislation. Okay, I mean, this just screams irregularities, and the fact that our own government doesn't comply with legislation. That bothers me. So, biggest obstacle for municipalities, with 86% receiving material compliance findings. Like I said, keep in mind the budget that has been proposed to us. And here it just says that the main weaknesses are inadequate skills and capacity. I'm surprised at the staff turnaround in these organizations, and the fact that the financial ineptitudeness, the inefficiencies in their financial management, they say is because of skills and capacity inefficiencies. Government's failures and a culture of no accountability and consequences. Let's try not act surprised, but it's just nice to see it in paper, am I right? We direct our audit reports to council. Some of you asked, how does this get distributed out to our elected leaders? They get sent to councils who are responsible for municipalities' budgets and performance plans. Mayors do the monitoring and oversight role, so checks and balances. Municipal managers, so I think that's the key for us, the general public, supported by senior management, are responsible for the implementation and maintaining effective and efficient systems of internal control, and are ultimately responsible for how their municipalities operate. According to National Treasury's budget review, government budgeted 62 billion in 22-23 for infrastructure spending in local governments. Okay. The failure in local governments are not unexpected. Good, I'm glad. For many years, we have reported on municipalities' poor financial management and worsening financial health, their inability to plan, monitor and report, deteriorating municipal infrastructure, lack of consequences for poor performance and transgressions. So that's great. But you can write it as much as you want. Maybe you need to think about escalating it. I don't know. There must be like an international council that can hold our government accountable. But yeah, I have reported it. That's nice. Escalate it. Make it public. The situation at Renosterberg local municipality remains particularly dire. The municipality, talking about escalating issues, has not prepared a performance report for the past 14 years. It also did not have an approved service delivery and budget implementation plan. The municipality has been dysfunctional for many years with a 100% vacancy rate at senior management level. But our government wants us to pay 0.5% more VAT now and 0.5% more VAT later, ripping everybody else off except themselves. Sorry. So they visit projects that were identified in the metrics part, which is the stuff I don't show you. They visit those and then report back on the actual status of whether or not it has been completed. So I'm going to take you through a couple of these. It is heartbreaking to see some of this. This shows how they're stealing our money, as well as the fact that they're promising to build all these things for the poor communities. And you'll see now what state these projects are left in. So I'm going to take you through a couple of these. Grab a box of tissues. It's disgusting. We reported findings on 54 of the projects visited, 72%. Most of the projects were delayed, cost more than planned, or were of poor quality. There were also delays in newly built infrastructure being put to use. There is an example somewhere I saw, I think it was in the Education Department's report. They built a whole bunch of schools but forgot to hire the teachers. So it's almost like this department's job is to build the schools. But I forget to tell my literally the same department, a sub-department of mine, that we need to put teachers in these schools. And so the schools sit, and then so the schools get vandalized, and then we start all over again. We're literally throwing money into a pit. Infrastructure maintenance. Sorry, I'm going back and forth. You must be nauseous by now. Infrastructure maintenance. Government should maintain and protect a total of 518 billion based on the values disclosed by municipalities in their financial statements. Treasury recommends that you spend at least 8% of that budget on infrastructure maintenance. Okay, so here's the shocker. In total, the 247 municipalities that we audited spent 17 billion on repairing and maintaining infrastructure. That's roughly 3% of the total value of the assets. So we've spent less this year than last year. These numbers. 36% spent less than 1% on their infrastructure maintenance, except for City of Cape Town, Metro in the Western Cape. None of the metros spent within the norm of 8%. So that's why our infrastructure looks the way it does. Here's some of the heartbreaking stories, and this isn't one of the worst ones. February 2020. Project was initially planned to be completed in 2021, delayed to September 23. Shocker, the land was illegally occupied by residents, who then had to be relocated to another area. November 2022. The extension and standing time costs amounted to 8.5 million. The site visit from the Auditor General in October 23, the project had not been completed, and they identified numerous instances of poor workmanship. Let me just really scroll in here for you. I mean, look at that. My dad was a civil engineer, so I can totally see how this is just not great. Here's the real deal breaker, the real heartbreaker of it all. Get a box of tissues. So in February 2016, Buffalo City, Eastern Cape, appointed a contractor for a due date January 2019, later changed to March 2021. A site visit from the auditor in November 23, the project hadn't been completed. The contractor was paid the amount of 387 million rand despite abandoning the site. So what's happened to the site since? Cable theft, vandalized motor control center. This is what happens to our infrastructure, and at the cost of the very poor. And in light of the budget speech our government's just given us, I guess I'm disappointed. They act, is audacious the right word? But they act as if it's not there. But it's a discussion point that we need to have. Here's another one. January 2019. Project's initial planned completion, January 2022, revised to September 23 because of poor performance. The site visitor from the Auditor General in October 23, the project hadn't been completed. The cost overruns of 14.5 million over the budgeted 46.85 million had already been paid to the contractor. That's 61 million rand was paid to a contractor that couldn't install an electricity project properly. Residents continue to experience regular power failures. And here, this is what our site looks like. Yeah, so if it's highlighted in orange, it's particularly disturbing, for me anyway. Malabongwe Ridge Housing Project, March 2010, so what's that, 15 years ago. Planned completion date, March 25, so this month. 13 years after the project began, only 1,368 of the 7,227 planned units had been completed. So it's taken them 15 years to deliver 19% of the project. More than 98%, however, of the 455 million, has been paid to the contractor. So for 19% of the work, he gets 98% of the payment. The lack of accountability stems wide and vast within the ANC. What caused this? I mean, municipalities have inadequate skills and capacity. The basics were often not in place. Officials did not always have job descriptions and performance agreements. All these documents were vague. The terms of construction contracts, such as penalty clauses, were not used to hold contractors and professional service providers accountable. Do you think a private company, one that's listed on the JSE, not listed on the JSE, could get away with this? See, but it's not their money. It's not their money. So how it gets spent is also not their problem. Weaknesses in revenue management. Don't act surprised. Every year, municipalities lose revenue because of water and electricity losses. So I would presume that this is, aging infrastructure and poor maintenance. 90% of the municipalities incurred water distribution losses, estimated at 13, I'm going to round it up, 14 billion. 46% recording average water loss above the 30% norm. 163 municipalities that provided electricity, 91% of them lost a combined 19 billion rand. And 108, 66%, had an average electricity loss above 10%. Wow, those are big numbers, 13 and 19 billion. Just in light of the budget we've been given and the fact that our government has no remorse, that even our international relations minister has 2 deputy ministers. And their salary, government salary bill, equates to 60% of the full budget of their spending over a year. And they show geen remorse, nix. Okay, so on top of that, we know that government institutions don't like to pay their electricity and water bills, over and on top of the losses that they suffer. Because if you thought it could get any worse, it does. So while municipalities' revenue might look healthy on paper, the money does not reach the bank. Municipalities will only be able to recover 35%, which is 125 billion of this revenue. Wow. 125 billion is only 35%. They can't even account for how they waste our money. I mean, what more could you ask for? Between November 2019, October 20, City of Tshwane paid salaries to employees appointed on a fixed-term contract to whom no work was allocated. There were no job descriptions for their roles. So I worked in corporate for 18 years and we hired based on the job description. So if you didn't have the job description, how did you know you needed the employees? But don't mind me, let's pay them. A criminal case which is ongoing. Oh, word, you see, now we're paying lawyers to fix problems and it just costs us more. And then we only recover 35% of it. With limited cash in the bank, municipalities prioritize paying salaries and you're remunerating councillors. These expenses totaled 127 billion. 61% of municipalities estimated recoverable own revenue and equitable share allocation. Okay, I don't know what that last piece means, but never mind. So they only used what was left to pay municipal suppliers and any other suppliers. So as long as them fat cats getting paid, don't mind us. We'll live in the dark. Okay, so here's just some of the waste that comes from not paying suppliers on time. KwaZulu-Natal, 2.2 million interest. Mpumalanga, Eskom incurred interest of 16 million. And Limpopo did not pay Eskom, incurred 5.4 million in interest. So the government mustn't come crying to me, asking me where they must find money. The government must open their audit report and start holding people accountable. There's your money. I keep saying this, but who's listening? Awards totaling 30 million were made to suppliers. Oh, this is very interesting. This is how they keep the money within themselves. Whoa, very eye-opening. Awards totaling 30.6 million were made to suppliers owned or managed by employees and councillors at 13 municipalities, totaling 217 million. Were made to suppliers owned or managed by other state officials at 80 municipalities. Non-compliance with procurement and contract management remained the biggest contributor. So don't follow the law, make the law, don't follow it. Municipalities disclosed a total of 27.59 billion in irregular expenditure in 1 year. But again, the amount can be even higher because 44%, almost half of our municipalities, did not report all the irregular expenditure they should have. And they couldn't even audit contracts worth 1.79 billion because of missing or incomplete information. The fact that it's missing or incomplete information means that you haven't followed due process, you're non-compliant, you're breaking legislative rules, and the project's going to be the same mess as I spoke of earlier. My question to you is, are you proud of yourself? And where's your remorse and where's your soul? I want to know where your soul is. Inefficient use of resources blows my mind. From September 2020 to August 22, Joburg Property Company paid rent estimating 13.6 million after the lease had expired because it did not remove equipment from its offices at the end of the lease term. And you know why? Because it's not your money. It's my money. So what do you care? So my idea, from an efficiency point of view, is you should have left the doors open so that people could have just looted it. And then it would have been empty. But you're not even trying to think out of the box on how to solve our problems for free. For this financial year, municipalities spent a total of 1.35 billion on consultants to help with their financial reporting. And then look, their financial reporting is still a dismal mess. It was a 17% decrease, so thanks guys. Yeah, so you're using 60% of the taxpayers' money to pay yourself so that you can use the other 40% to hire the consultants to do your work for you. In 90% of the cases, the municipalities and not the consultants were responsible for not deriving the full benefit of the appointments. So not only do we pay all of that money to consultants, we also don't get the full benefit of it in 97% of the cases. They appointed the consultants too late, did not adequately review the consultants' work, could not make the required financial records available. Then why bother hiring them? We have been reporting on the ineffective or inefficient use of consultants for financial reporting for many years. So, City of Tshwane, Gauteng. they appointed a consultant. Controls were not in place for reviewing the work, because there's no controls anywhere in government. No metrics, no controls. And this resulted in an estimated loss of 7.1 million. Further action is being taken to fully resolve the matter. But that further action cost us more money. And while we're trying to recover the money, we're building up our deficit, our interest. So it's a loss, it's a double loss. It's a loss of 1.5. Anyway. Eastern Cape. IT and software. The billing is, wow, we spend a lot for these guys to have the latest and greatest for every uncle, family member, aunt's uncle's brother. But specifically related to Eastern Cape, procured more software licenses for its operating system, more than it needed, resulting in an estimated financial loss of 34 million. I'm not referring to the cost saving. I've explained my viewpoint on that. I don't care about cost savings. It just shows how much could be wasted and how much they're trying to waste. KwaZulu-Natal. So they made a payment without evidence of the service being received. Estimated financial loss, 21 million. Little bit here and a little bit there. Everyone's getting rich on our dime. 53% of these municipalities have indicators of financial strain. Half of our municipalities. By year end, so this is the end of, it would have been June, July 23, yes. By year end, 54% of our municipalities did not have enough cash available to cover fixed monthly operating expenses for at least a month. Total deficit in local government for the year amounted to 13.14 billion. While 37% of our municipalities spent more money than they generated. It's basic maths. And again, I point out that no private institution would have been able to get away with this. And what is the Auditor General's responsibility on reporting the same thing year after year after year? Do you just copy and paste and change the numbers? Or do we escalate? Okay, so it was 260 material irregularities resulted in a material financial loss of 7.34 billion. Northwest Municipality did not collect 46 million owed to it by the fresh produce market. And now it's in litigation. My question is, how much more is that costing us? November 22, City of Joburg paid for but did not receive, how's this, 20 specialized fire and rescue vehicles, including equipment for emergency management services, valued at 62.5 million. 20 specialized fire and rescue vehicles, paid for but did not receive. Yeah, because it's not your money. I would love just 1 year of having access to other people's money, and then to know that I don't have to even account for it. What a life. Councils have done very little to curb the increase in year-on-year spending. Balance of irregular expenditure that's accumulated over many years is 137 million. Unauthorized expenditure, so completely separate, stands at 104 billion. Fruitful and wasteful expenditure, which sits as a whole nother looting pot, 19.7 billion. Yeah, it's here in a public report for all of us to see. including our leaders, which I guess is the real problem, hey? Okay, so municipalities in all provinces continue to show signs of significant financial difficulty. 74 of these municipalities are in such a dire position that there is significant doubt as to whether they will be able to continue operating in the near future. My question is, but what does that mean? Okay. Now get ready for the real numbers. I want to tell you about deficits. So Eastern Cape has a deficit of 1 billion, Free State 2.5 billion, Gauteng 2.1 billion. This is just the deficit. KwaZulu-Natal, which sits separately to all the other expenditure. KwaZulu-Natal 1 billion, Limpopo 0.3 billion, Mpumalanga 3.8 billion, Winner, Northern Cape 0.69 billion, Northwest 1.4, Western Cape 0.15 billion. We have our irregular expenditure for the financial year I'm talking about, and then the closing balance. So irregular expenditure carries over. I'm going to speak about the closing balance. Eastern Cape's closing balance for irregular expenditure, 36 billion. Free State, 12 billion. Gauteng, 25 billion. KwaZulu-Natal, 14 billion. Don't get distracted with those little green things. Don't look at those little green things. Still 14 billion. Imagine what you could do with 14 billion. Okay, Limpopo, 5.5 billion. Mpumalanga, 5.6 billion. Northern Cape, 3.4 billion. Northwest, you're doing well. 32 billion. I'm tired of saying the word billion. Eastern Cape still takes the cake, sorry. And then Western Cape, 1.1 billion. Okay, so our total for all provinces irregular spend is 136.98 billion. Hey government, what you say for yourself? This is even more exciting. So this is a completely different pot of gold. Unauthorized and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. So these are just for the financial year. It's not a carryover. Eastern Cape, unauthorized 1.9, add 0.43. Okay, you can see the numbers on the screen. I'm just gonna, Free State 4.5 billion, 5, almost 6 billion. Gauteng, great, we're gonna save Johannesburg. The G20's coming. I'm very happy, but now we have to find that 6.6 billion. Let's just round it up to 7. We just unauthorized and fruitless. We have a 7 billion rand bill. So yeah, it's a lot. Western Cape, 0.3 billion. 0.04 billion. Just to prove that it can be done, it gets even more exciting, as if it couldn't. If you're still with me, I mean, after all these numbers, it's tongue twister for sure. Eastern Cape owes Eskom 2.2 billion and 500 million for water. Free State, how's this? Almost 10 billion in Eskom arrears and almost 8 billion in water arrears. 18 billion, 18.5 billion. Gauteng. No, I look forward to you showing off these new roads and clean streets to the G20. But my question to you, Mr. Mayor, is what are we going to do with our 4.38 Eskom arrears and our 4.33 water arrears? Do you have a plan for those? KwaZulu-Natal, 1.1 Eskom arrears, 1.5 water arrears. Limpopo, actually doing quite well here. 0.9 billion for Eskom and 1.3 for water. Oh, Mpumalanga, 16.34 billion for Eskom, 47%. Wow. And 1.42 billion for water. Northern Cape, 2.7 billion for Eskom, 0.64 billion for water. Northwest, 3 billion for Eskom and 3 billion for water. Western Cape, 0.17 billion for Eskom and 0 for water. So in total, all our provinces owe Eskom 40 billion and water 20 billion. So yeah, where's the money for the improvements coming? And when do we start dealing with this deficit? Because do people understand the term compounded problems? Because I feel like that's what our government is doing. I'm actually finished with that report. I want to show you this. So here's a shocker. Good. Top 3 provinces. Eastern Cape. Is that 42 billion in total that you in arrears, or you have bills outstanding, arrears, I guess. Northwest 42.3 billion. Gauteng 42.8 billion. Free State 37.6 billion. Mpumalanga 32.8. No, wait. Yes, 21. And that's 1.88.9. Okay, so this is where the real shocker is. I've totaled the amounts each province owes. We have 1.8 billion. I just want to make sure I've got that right. 1.8. Yep. That's Western Cape, so that's the best then. Northern Cape, 9 billion. Limpopo, 11 billion. KwaZulu-Natal, 21 billion. Mpumalanga, 32 billion. Free State, 37 billion. Gauteng, 42 billion. Northwest, 42 billion. And Eastern Cape, 42 billion. Eastern Cape taking the cake. You win as if it was a prize. You will find a reason to make a party for this, because your catering and entertainment costs are also very exorbitant. For people who are 42 billion rand in debt, you guys really have a lot of consultant and IT and entertainment costs. But we'll get there, don't worry. In total, 241 billion is our province's waste, looting, theft. Yeah, because like some of you pointed out, it's not lost, it's stolen. We've been robbed of 241 billion. I'm going to leave you with a video that Musi Munani had with Newsroom Africa 2 days ago, the day before budget. And he was just explaining that Gauteng is in the situation it is, and the fact that he's made the mayors and the parties aware that it should be put under financial administration. But nothing's been done. We're one of the top 3 worst provinces, and we need to take the reins on this. So I'm going to leave you with that video before I go. I hope this was great. I hope it wasn't too long. I'm sorry for all the billions and billions and billions and billions and billions, and I'm going to sleep with those words going through my head. But yes, so if you enjoyed this, thank you so much. Leave a comment, like, share, subscribe. Thank you for joining me. Really appreciate it. Thank you for the support. Over and out.
You're watching news at Prime. Let's get into this conversation now. The Standing Committee on Appropriations has decried the lack of involvement and consultation when it comes to budget planning. The Finance Minister tomorrow is expected to outline the country's spending plans after last month's speech was postponed due to the conflict over a possible VAT hike. The committee chairperson is Musi Maimane, who joins us now. Mr. Maimane, good evening to you. Thank you very much for your time. Can I start with perhaps what could be a far-fetched idea, at least in your eyes, or perhaps you might believe that I'm on the right track here. What happens if this budget is not passed? Are there mechanisms that help ameliorate that?
Well, I think let's understand that the budget is the same as any other law. And so effectively, what begins to happen is that what the minister will table tomorrow are proposals. It then post that will serve in our committee as the Division of Revenue Act and the Appropriations Bill. Both those laws are what we now typically call the budget. It goes for public consultation, which will happen. South Africans have every right to make input. And then post that, a vote is then taken by this National Assembly to achieve whether it then gets sent to the National Council of Provinces and then to the President for signature. So what will happen tomorrow are mere proposals. And I want to go to great lengths to remind South Africans that the job of Parliament is to give us expression to their aspirations. to make sure that their inputs are considered. And the law makes it possible for Parliament to reject, amend, or to make recommendations in the budget as is envisaged in the Money Bills Act. And so we've still got a long way to go before whatever is tabled tomorrow becomes the law of the country. Agreed.
But I think my question still stands, and you've actually helped us understand that what tomorrow is going to be presented are, I don't want to use the word mere proposals, but are firm proposals. But it then is up to the processes thereafter that help get this budget passed. But what I'm saying is that we have seen many firsts. What happens if the budget is rejected? Are there mechanisms to try and deal with that?
Yeah, and I mean, I think post that, we then go into what would be, in my view, some of the legal and constitutional crisis spaces we'd never thought we'd go into. The immediate proposal, it does make provisions as to how much spending can happen. So 45% of departmental spending can then occur until it becomes the law. But then there needs to be a process upon which this engagement can take place. I would hope that as a country would never get there, because we're dealing with a crisis genuinely of unemployment, genuinely of a lack of growth. But if that were to happen, and we can begin to have that conversation in the second half of the year rather than in this first half, I do believe that we will be able to find a workable way forward and achieve a budget that is voted upon, that relies on the constitutional provisions, and then we can go from there. So I'm confident of that score, but it will take a very significant process for us to get to the place you are describing, where effectively there aren't enough votes to carry the budget through.
Yeah. Let's then deal with what we have said earlier as we were introducing this particular discussion. You have decried the lack of involvement or consultation in the budget build-up process. The finance minister, very clear that the budget, by its very nature, carries very sensitive information and at times market-sensitive information. How much access there needs to be, or how much consultation must the finance minister conduct before he gets to what he's going to do tomorrow?
Well, I think it's not for me to make that suggestion to the finance minister. It's the intergovernmental fiscal framework, which is the law that governs this type of consultation. One of the institutions is the FFC, which is the Finance and Fiscal Commission, which the minister is enjoined to consult. It is in the act, it is in the law. And furthermore, when it comes to post the tabling exercise, South Africans have a voice. You and I can make input into that budget in the way that the law capacitates us to do it in the Money Bills Act. So in many ways, I think we mustn't feel like the minister would be doing anyone a favor. He or she would merely be complying with the law. That is on the first instance. The second is that as it comes to the politics of the GNU on one end, I think that is a fairly different process in terms of what needs to be engaged on that score. I am sympathetic to the minister that the figures and all of that become tricky. But here is what the opportunity looks like post the tabling of the budget. Here are the two fundamental choices we have to make. The first is whether we increase VAT by 2%, or in essence, we scrap the SRD grant. Would it not give political parties an opportunity to vote as to how they express their choices, so that when it comes back to the electorate, South Africans will know which parties were pro the increasing of the VAT or pro the decreasing of or the reduction of the SRD? Because these matters are where we are as a country. We have to make tough choices. We have to fund for infrastructure. And what my job is, as the Appropriations Committee, is to identify all of the work that happens in wasteful, fruitless expenditure, or expenditure that doesn't lead itself to growth, or expenditure that, in my view, is at odds with where the priority areas are, and give Parliament the right for them to express a choice in those areas. And I think that is what it is to be able to build an efficient government. The choices we have to make now are not on the income side. Yeah. They are genuinely on the expenditure side, what gets cut. And I think political parties in Parliament must be given the right to give expression to those choices.
Well, let me go back to one of the issues that you have raised in this response that you have just given, the VAT discussion. And it would appear that it is going to be something that we are all looking to see whether or not it remains in the minister's speech. Tonight, I think about an hour ago, News 24, quoting an IMF representative who was talking in a webinar today, and they are suggesting that for any permanent new spending, such as a social welfare grant, we are talking SRD here, and there are those who are saying if the SRD goes, then it means that it automatically should be replaced by the basic income grant. IMF is saying this new spending should be paid for with new revenue streams, and that's what the finance minister was emphasizing on this show on Sunday. Where do you stand as the Appropriations Committee?
Polly, I stand at the school of thought that says that South Africa must focus on growth. No one has ever taxed themselves to prosperity. So on the first instance, I don't think a VAT increase is going to help that. It disproportionately affects the poor, even if you zero rate a basket of goods. The growth plan must focus itself on infrastructure and public-private partnerships. And so for me, I would be tabling alongside with that an ambitious, bold plan to say we are going to attract investment in, for example, I'll take one aspect, recovery of rail and logistics infrastructure. You do that, you interconnect multiple provinces, you increase tourism, and you've got a better probability of being able to see what is now at below 1% GDP growth to about 2 to 3% growth. On the SRD issue, this is a very difficult decision we have to make. And I am of the view that at this point in time, it's a 37 billion rands ticket as it comes through. If the Constitutional Court ruling, which has been granted, increases excess, which is, it ruled that it was unconstitutional to limit excess, if you have to comply just with that Constitutional Court ruling, it would take that 37 billion rands and move it north of 50 billion rands, in which instance it becomes even further unaffordable. So I hold the view that, one, it will be difficult, but we have to face up to the fact that it was a COVID grant. It doesn't mean that it has to be an SR, it has to be a basic income grant. It was a COVID grant that perhaps we need to withdraw. But as we withdraw it, the policy shift must be that, coming back to my earlier point about infrastructure-led growth, you then create an extended public works program to which all of the respective numbers of beneficiaries that sit in that program can apply for that work, get it, begin to earn an income through it, and then you don't make it a grant, you make it an employment creation scheme that's focused on rail. But you have to be willing to make the tough decision. If we don't do that and simply say, well, we'll increase VEST by 1% and then we will keep the SRD grant, next year it will face up inflationary pressures, which means you'll have to increase it, you'll have to comply with the Concord, and more crucially, in a country that is already borrowing itself to beyond junk status, to increase borrowing would be to really take a knife to the South African economy. So it's a time for choices. This is not a debate about we can do everything. It's a time for choices, and we have to make choices that are sustainable, that are pro-growth, and that must be a fundamental focus in our country.
If social spending, Mr. Maimane, such as the SRD grant, is to go away, the Minister of Finance very clear that economic growth is what the country needs in order to get there. But how do you achieve that with an ESCOM that once again appears to be a going concern?
Well, Colin, I think sometimes we need to take a step back a little bit and ask ourselves the question, how did we find ourselves in this situation? And we find ourselves in this point because effectively money was stolen. Hundreds of billions of rands was stolen. So when somebody wants to now ask South Africans to pay for money that was stolen by an increase in VAT, that's how we must look at it. And therefore, it would be unfair for people who were defrauded to now suddenly also be asked to cover that loss. Having said that, I also hold the absolute view that when you look at Eskom and where it sits and its debt instruments, already we've adjudicated as an appropriations committee a number of bailouts towards SOEs. It is now a time that we begin to rationalize some of those SOEs. On the energy provision point of view, I do think that keeping Eskom as one entity is unsustainable. It has its own compliance with its own debt structures, and so it must continue to do that. The splitting in terms of market reaction from a generation to a distribution company, that is necessary given the competitive elements that go into this issue. What we now need to do is figure out how do we ring-fence that debt, give capacity to municipalities who can reticulate or give out their own energy, and introduce new competition in the space. It is the only way we are going to sustain that question. Yeah. A cross-defaulting Eskom is going to be disastrous for the South African economy in total. So we need to think about that in a way that says what is sustainable, how do we help municipalities stop wasting money? Because the biggest risk to Eskom's fiscal sustainability is equally so municipal debt, which is scheduled to peak at about 130 billion rands in the medium term. So my genuine proposal is that let's go back, capacitate municipalities, make sure they're effective at collection so that they can honor their obligations to Eskom.
Well, you've touched on it, and we're going to end on that very point. Municipalities, today, during the question and answer session, it was your question to the President as to whether or not the city of Johannesburg should be placed under administration. I'd like for us first to listen to his response, and you'll tell us whether you were satisfied with what he had to say. Let's listen to the President now.
The banks themselves are very keen to work with our metro government there to revamp and to revive the city, but more importantly, to make sure that service delivery is delivered in the way that our citizens or our residents in Johannesburg expect. So short of calling for administration, which can also be a very long legislative process, there is now a new energy that has been injected to all stakeholders, be it academics, be it young people. They all came together when I was there, and they committed themselves to working to turn Johannesburg around. And I do believe that Johannesburg will be turned around.
Workable solution, Mr. Maimane, or pie in the sky kind of talk?
Johannesburg is in an absolute crisis. It is not going to take more committees, more goodwill, more any of that. Whilst you are processing the ability to place Johannesburg under administration, certainly the province has got a crucial role to play, but I would have by now, through the Ministry of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, appointed a very strong administrator, coordinate what the response is there, because the question was well within the context of infrastructure build, which has affected the people of Johannesburg in that communities are without water. Some aspects have got load reduction because of aging infrastructure. The road infrastructure in Johannesburg is collapsing. We cannot afford that to the largest metro in Africa. And therefore, it is an urgent call. Otherwise, you will be taking pension money, which is what the president proposed, and throwing it into a bottomless pit that Johannesburg could quickly become. So I want to urgently say we need an administrator now and ensure that we execute a timeless plan to turn Joburg around for the people of Johannesburg. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem. And certainly going into next year's election, citizens can express a vote on that issue. But in the meantime, between a year and now, Johannesburg cannot deteriorate any further. We are losing investment, we're losing property values, we're losing infrastructure in Johannesburg, and it's been through multiple leadership areas. That's why I think it needs an urgent administrator to take control of what happens in that city. And the president lives there, so he would have seen the streets that he walks in, the places that he drives around. It is not enough to say, well, goodwill will sort it out. It needs deliberate and urgent action now.
Mr. Maimane, thank you very much for your time. Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Appropriations in Parliament.